The golden Mediterranean sun beats down on the asphalt of the Circuito de Jerez, but inside the Prima Pramac Yamaha garage, the atmosphere is freezing. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu sits on his toolkit, helmet still on, his visor a dark shield hiding eyes that have seen nothing but the rear tire of the pack all afternoon. Outside, the grandstands are screaming for the local heroes, but here the only sound is the rhythmic mechanical whine of tire warmers and the hushed, urgent whispers of engineers huddled over a glowing telemetry screen. No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold during this session, a performance so uncharacteristic, so devoid of the Turkish lightning spark, that it would change everything for him, his team, and the entire 2026 season. The Sultan of Braking, a man who redefined what was possible on a motorcycle in World Superbikes, currently looks like a ghost in his own garage. The stopwatch doesn't lie, P19, nearly 2 seconds off the pace in a sport where 2/10 is an eternity. It wasn't just a bad session, it was a total technical and psychological blackout. As the mechanics avoid eye contact, a realization begins to settle over the Jerez paddock. The transition everyone thought would be a fairy tale is rapidly turning into a career-defining disaster. Yet, the real reason for this collapse wasn't just a lack of speed. It was a fundamental betrayal by the machine beneath him, and what the paddock discovered next shocked everyone. But behind that calm expression Toprak tries to maintain for the cameras, pressure was building fast. For decades, Yamaha's identity was built on the Inline-Four engine, a smooth, corner-speed monster that brought Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo to glory. But in 2026, they threw the blueprint in the trash. The arrival of the radical YZR-M1 V4 was supposed to be Toprak's secret weapon, the engine that would finally give him the raw power to fight the Ducatis on equal terms. It was a gamble that shook the technical foundations of the sport. Inside the garage, whispers began spreading that the V4 wasn't the savior they promised. While the engine delivered explosive acceleration, it brought with it a dark side. The new chassis, designed to house the V4, was behaving like a wild animal. Telemetry data from Jerez revealed a terrifying truth. The bike was losing nearly half a second in the technical fourth sector alone. The aerodynamics meant to keep the front wheel down were creating a wake effect that made the bike nearly unsteerable in high-speed transitions. Toprak, a rider who lives for the limit of the front tire, found himself fighting a machine that felt alien. Every time he tried to apply his signature aggressive braking, the V4's weight distribution pushed the front end into a dead zone where grip simply vanished. Yet this technical struggle was only the beginning of a far bigger storm brewing within the team's hierarchy. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same for Toprak's confidence. In the world of production-based racing, he was the master of the Pirelli tire, a rubber that loved his stoppy style and allowed him to treat a motorcycle like a mountain bike. But MotoGP is the land of Michelin, and the Michelin front tire is a jealous mistress. It demands a specific surgical loading technique that is the exact opposite of everything Toprak has practiced for a decade. According to insiders, the frustration in the garage reached a breaking point during the Saturday morning session. The technical analysis was brutal. The Michelin front was overheating under Toprak's heavy braking, causing the pressure to spike and the grip to evaporate instantly. He wasn't just fighting his rivals, he was fighting a wall of physics. Some mechanics claimed something felt off with the electronic mapping, suggesting that the engine brake strategies were actually fighting against Toprak's natural instincts. He was trapped in a technical limbo, unable to ride like a rookie and prohibited from riding like a champion. Media criticism began to mount, with some suggesting he had stayed in superbikes too long, that his habits were now his greatest enemy. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely, as the pressure moved from the tires to the man standing in the corner of the garage. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras in the cold light of the data-sharing meeting. Toprak isn't alone in the Pramac garage. He's paired with Jack Miller, a veteran who has mastered almost every V4 configuration on the grid. While Toprak was drowning in P19, Miller was consistently knocking on the door of the top 10. For a rider with Toprak's ego, a man used to being the alpha in any garage, seeing Miller's telemetry was like a physical blow. The data showed Miller was slower into the corners, but significantly faster on the exit, utilizing a V-shaped lines that Toprak simply couldn't replicate. Inside the garage, whispers began spreading about a rift in development direction. Reports suggested that the team was prioritizing Miller's feedback because it produced safe points, leaving Toprak to figure out the radical V4 on his own. The psychological pressure from these results began to manifest in his body language, the slumped shoulders, the shorter debriefs, the lack of his usual playful charm. He was becoming a passenger on a 300-horsepower rocket. Rumors suggested deeper tension behind closed doors, with speculation emerging that certain members of the technical crew were losing patience with the superbike experiment. But what happened after that left even his closest team members stunned, as the weekend moved from technical struggle to a total race day collapse. The Sunday race at Jerez should have been a proving ground, but it became a nightmare recorded in high definition. As the lights went out, Toprak made a decent start, but by lap 5, the Jerez monster reared its head. The technical section of the track, normally his playground, became a graveyard for his ambitions. The unmanageable bike left him struggling just to stay on the racing line. Onboard footage showed the YZR-M1 shuddering under braking, the front tire protesting every time he tried to tip it into the fast right-handers. Then came the moment of impact, a high-speed incident with Lorenzo Savadori that saw Toprak's Yamaha tumbling into the gravel pool. It wasn't just a crash, it was a symbolic end to his Jerez campaign. While he stood up quickly, the image of him walking away from the smoking wreckage while the leaders crossed the finish line 40 seconds ahead told the whole story. The Turkish Lightning had been grounded. In the aftermath, some believe the crash was a result of a desperate attempt to override a bike that simply wasn't there for him. The technical team frantically checked the engine brake mapping, searching for a ghost in the machine that might explain the sudden loss of control. But what they found in the data was even more concerning. Toprak was pushing the bike to a limit that the current V4 chassis simply couldn't support. But behind that crash, a different kind of war was being waged in the paddock. Kenan Sofuoglu, Toprak's mentor and manager, began a strategic campaign to protect his protege from the shark-infested waters of the MotoGP media. Sofuoglu's public stance was calculated. Our real race is to be the best Yamaha. By lowering the bar, he was trying to bleed the pressure out of the garage. He wasn't comparing Toprak to the Ducatis. He was comparing him to Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins. However, this political maneuvering created its own set of tensions. Inside the paddock, whispers suggested that Yamaha's senior management wasn't happy with the holding pattern narrative. They didn't hire a 3-time world champion to finish as the best of the bottom. The weight of a nation's expectations, the first Turkish rider in the premier class, started to feel like a lead vest. Contract negotiations for 2027 were already being discussed in hushed tones, with rumors suggesting that if Toprak didn't show signs of life by the summer break, his factory-back status could be in jeopardy. Yet just as the narrative seemed to settle on Toprak's failure, a secret pivot began to surface, one that suggested the nightmare at Jerez was actually part of a much larger, more calculated game. The real turning point in Toprak's mental state might have happened away from the asphalt, in a private meeting regarding the future of the sport. A staggering revelation had begun to circulate among the elite teams. The 2027 regulation change wasn't just about engines, it was about the potential switch to Pirelli tires as the sole supplier. For Toprak, this was the ultimate lifeline. If he could survive the Michelin nightmare of 2026, he would return to the rubber he spent his life mastering in 2027. Suddenly, the struggle at Jerez took on a new light. Some insiders claimed that Toprak's current season was being treated as a live-action laboratory. He wasn't racing for 2026 trophies, he was being used as a guinea pig to develop the V4 engine's electronics so they would be Pirelli ready for the next era. This guinea pig status, while strategically sound, was an emotional disaster for a winner. It meant accepting a year of public humiliation for a potential future glory. The conflict between his heart, which wanted to win now, and his head, which knew the bike wasn't ready, created a rift in his performance that even the best engineers couldn't bridge. He was a champion in a holding pattern, trapped in a nightmare that was technically mandatory. As the trucks are packed and the Jerez circuit falls silent, the 2026 standings tell a grim story. Toprak Razgatlioglu leaves Spain with 0 points and a bruised ego. The gap between him and the front of the grid remains a canyon that many believe he will never cross. The nightmare at Jerez was not just another bad weekend. It was a stark, cold warning that the journey in the top class is a meat grinder that doesn't care about your past titles or your Sultan nickname. The question is no longer how quickly Toprak can win, but whether he can survive the psychological toll of being an also-ran. His body language in the final debrief reflected a man who had realized the true scale of the mountain he has to climb. The 2026 season has only just begun, but the signals from Spain cannot be ignored. Is this the beginning of a legendary comeback, or the first chapter in a story of a champion who flew too close to the MotoGP sun? As the paddock moves toward Le Mans, one thing is certain. The pressure inside the Yamaha garage has reached a boiling point, and the next twist in this documentary will determine if Toprak Razgatlioglu remains a hero or becomes a cautionary tale. But what the paddock discovered next, a secret test scheduled behind closed doors, suggests that this nightmare was only the beginning of an even greater, more dangerous challenge.